the broadcaster, YouTube. And so, hey everybody, welcome. For those who don't know me, my name is Mark Gillette and I'm a NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador. Welcome tonight to tonight's presentation. We will get started shortly. I do want to very quickly, I've been talking to the screen and not talking to you, so I apologize. I do want to mention some upcoming events that I have. They're pretty exciting, so I hope that you will join me. The first one will be on Wednesday, July the 21st at 4 p.m. This is going to be a live guided virtual tour of JPL. This is going to be a little different if you're rejoining me from past YouTube live events that I've done, in that it will not be a YouTube live event. It's going to be done via Zoom. So I have been asked by JPL to collect the names and email addresses of the people that will be participating. So if you would like to participate in a live guided virtual tour of JPL, what I need you to do is please send me an email at mguillette, that's my first initial last name, at Valencia College, that's where I teach, VALENCIACOLLEGE.edu. Just send me that email that has the names of all of the participants in your party, and probably 2 days before the actual event occurs, which again will be on Wednesday, July 21st at 4 p.m., I will send you a detailed email exactly how to join in for that, what I think will be a really awesome event. On Sunday, August 22nd, the next month, I have a YouTube live event entitled NASA's New Moon and Mars Rocket, the Space Launch System. And I'm excited to be able to interview a friend and a former NASA employee or a contractor. She's an engineer and her name is Leslie Day. She actually worked on parts of the Space Launch System. And so she's going to have some stories and some pictures to share. So all you need to do for that event is just come right back to my YouTube channel on Sunday, August 22nd, shortly before 7 p.m. and look for the live event. I was also saying, while you couldn't hear me, that there are a lot of really neat things happening coming up at NASA and in astronomy and space exploration. We have the James Webb Space Telescope that will be launched, currently scheduled for October 31st on an Ariane 5 rocket from French Guiana in South America. So probably I'm thinking I will put together a presentation, a YouTube live presentation about that telescope for sometime in October. So you can always come back to my YouTube channel and you can check for any advertisement that I put up there, and it will have the specific dates and times. Lots of other things happening, but I feel like I've talked too long to the screen and not enough to you all, and I don't want to keep our speaker waiting any longer, because she was very kind to agree to do this and to take her time. So I certainly appreciate that. Don't forget, all my viewers, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And throughout the presentation, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our invited guests, please put them in the chat box and I will be monitoring that. And April, how would you like to do this? Would you like me to kind of interrupt you and say, I got a question for you, or want me to wait till the end? What's best for you?
I think it would be great. You can just interrupt me at any time. That would work out just fine.
Anytime. Very good. So I'll just kind of interrupt you then.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to have my husband, Spencer. He is going to do the formal introduction. So I'm going to turn it over to Spencer.
Hi there. So we're proud to introduce April Lynott. April Lynott has been an aerospace educator at the formal, informal, and federal agency level for over 25 years. Currently, the STEM integration lead for NASA's Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate. April works with internal and external NASA organizations to find ways to bring STEM education and NASA's aeronautics work together. She also created and is an Aerospace Alley Education Committee member for Colorado, which supports aviation and space education and workforce development, including the statewide CTE High School Aviation Advisory Board. Born and raised in the rural town of Mars, Pennsylvania, April works on making aerospace science more accessible to all educators and students. She holds graduate degrees in both English, with emphasis in science writing, and in space education. She is constantly working on cross-curricular ties to STEM content. She authored a STEM literacy chapter to Best Practices in STEM Education, Innovative Approaches from Einstein Fellow Alumni, which was published in the fall of 2018. Other published aeronautics projects include Small Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Lessons and Activities, an activity guide that focuses on Earth's atmosphere and human survival at high altitudes, development of AOPA's high school education curriculum and lessons that support Share Space Foundation's Giant Moon Map. She also has contributed science content to Challenger Center for Space Science, the LEGO Space Challenge Activity Pack, and Disney's Youth Experiences in Science. April works tirelessly to bridge the gap between education, audiences, organizations, and industry. So let's welcome our speaker for tonight, April Lynott.
Thanks, April.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, your volume is was going in and out a little bit.
Okay, let me see here.
It almost sounded like your speaker.
Okay, how is this? Is this
Okay.
any better?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, great. And please interrupt me if you can't hear me, if it goes away or anything like that.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm really excited to talk to all of you about one of my personal passions, which is NASA aeronautics. And we have a lot of different exciting things going on in NASA aeronautics that focus particularly on the future of flight. So I will do a presentation tonight that talks to you a little bit about where we've come from and what we are here within NASA aeronautics. So if you take a look at this slide, what you'll see is that NASA aeronautics, we're the first A in NASA. So we've made contributions to aviation for decades. We started before there was space. Before NASA involved anything with space, we were aeronautics. We were the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics before we became NASA. And then we transitioned over once we started including space exploration. A little bit of background you may not be familiar with is that every U.S. commercial aircraft and every air traffic control tower here in the United States has NASA developed technology. So we're a little bit of everywhere, even though you may not see what all we've done. We really take a look at and focus on the future of aviation. So when you hear of NASA aeronautics, we're looking at aviation 10, 20, 30 years down the road. So what you see in the air today was already developed long ago, and we're taking a look at where we're headed in the future coming up. So what we're really focusing on these days is we're taking a look at quiet supersonic flight over land with our X-59 aircraft, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a few minutes. We're taking a look at what our future airspace is going to look like. If you think about it, there are more and more aircraft in the air today, both manned and unmanned. And we have to figure out how to integrate all of these different flying vehicles into the air at the same time, safely, efficiently, and with as little impact on the environment as possible. So in terms of that, we're also focusing on sustainable aviation. How do we keep this going? How do we make our skies friendlier for the environment? And how do we build things better so that we have as little impact on our climate as possible? And then we're taking a look at what we call advanced air mobility, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. You can think of that as our flying cars, our drone delivery vehicles, and all of those Jetsons types of things that that we once imagined before, well, they're actually becoming a reality. And within most of our lifetimes, we are going to see a lot of that in the air, which is pretty exciting, maybe a little intimidating, but exciting at the same time. So how we do this is a little bit about NASA 101. Basically, we have 4 NASA centers that focus on aeronautics. And those include Ames Research Center, which is in California. We also have our Armstrong Flight Research Center, and that is also in California. We have Glenn Research Center in Ohio, and we have Langley Research Center in Virginia. Those 4 out of the 10 major NASA centers focus primarily on aeronautics, although there are other things that go on at these centers as well. And oftentimes these 4 centers share lots of different activities. So you'll have one part of a program working in one section, and then you'll have another part of our program happening at another NASA center. So lots of collaboration between all of these different centers. So it's also interesting to take a look at a map like this where we have our locations marked, and you'll notice that lots of our different NASA centers tend to be more closer to the coasts and to the edges of the United States. It's not that we don't have any involvement anywhere else in the United States, but if you think about logistics of flying, launching rockets, and lots of these different types of things, it's safer over water or near the edges of places, just in case things go wrong. So it's much better to have test facilities out where there aren't lots of people. So you'll see that a lot of these areas are along the coast. So just kind of an interesting tidbit there for you. So taking a look at what we're focusing on in NASA Aeronautics, one of our primary focus areas at this point is sustainable aviation. So what that means is figuring out ways that we can build quieter, more efficient engines. One of our major programs, which I'll talk about, is quieting the boom or the sonic boom. We're also taking a look at air traffic technologies that allow aircraft to be more safe and efficient and share airspace. If you think about more aircraft in the skies, if you don't handle the air traffic control problems, then airplanes have to stay in the air longer. If you're in the air longer, you're using more fuel, and you're increasing fuel consumption and contributing to climate change. So as long as you can keep things out of the air, as much as possible, then you're going to improve our climate. We're also taking a look at reducing fuel consumption through both electric air propulsion and our better airspace systems. So again, I will talk about what some of that is that we're doing as we go along. So some exciting programs all focused on doing just that. So what this means, and it's really exciting, is return of our X-planes. So there are lots of different X-planes that NASA has been working with since the 1940s. That never stopped. However, for a long period of time, most of our X-planes were not piloted. So those were remote control, subscale aircraft that were representations of full-size aircraft. If you think back, and a lot of you probably think back to when we first broke the sound barrier, and that happened with our Bell X-1, and that's when we were still NACA, or the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. That was our very first X-plane that was piloted, but again, a lot of the other X-planes throughout the years were not piloted. Well, we're back. We're back with piloted aircraft, and that involves right now 2 of our latest X-planes, which is our X-57 Maxwell and our X-59 Quest. I will talk about each of those a little bit separately, but both of them are working on some great innovative technologies. I like to think of our X-planes as kind of the runway models of the sky. You are not going to see X-57s flying all over the airspace later on after we test out our technology. What we're doing instead is we're taking these X-planes, we're testing technologies, we're testing ideas, and those ideas will then be taken and utilized by industry, by companies, and by others who will turn that technology into something usable for the public. So you'll see the last 2 pictures on This slide right here, the second to last picture is of our X-59 Quest, which I'll talk about momentarily. And then the one on the far right is our X-59 or X-57 Maxwell, which is our all-electric aircraft. So those are the two latest projects, which are very exciting. So I'll start with our X-59 Quest. Quest stands for Quiet Supersonic Technology. It's the first of our piloted X-planes that we've had in decades. So what it's going to do is going to fly faster than the speed of sound over land. So some of you might be familiar with our airspace and the fact that we are not currently allowed to fly at supersonic speeds over land. That's limited to supersonic over water at this point. And part of it is because of the disruption. So if you see the picture there, you'll see that an F-18, when it makes a sonic boom, creates quite a loud noise. And if you've ever heard a sonic boom, you'll realize how loud that actually is, kind of like a crack of thunder. For those of us who love aviation, it's an awesome sound that's kind of fun. For wildlife and others who might not be as used to it, it can be pretty unnerving. So what the goal is with our I'm looking at the F-18, with our X-59, our goal is to quiet that sonic boom into what we call a sonic thump. And that sonic thump is something much quieter, less invasive, and hopefully easier for people to listen to. And our goal is to take our X-59, which will be creating these sonic thumps, and to fly test flights all over the country. And they will measure sound output. They will measure public response to that sound output, with the hope of gathering data to prove to the FAA, and the FAA ultimately regulates what we are and aren't allowed to do in U.S. airspace. And as long as these sounds are more acceptable to the public and less disruptive to wildlife, etc., that they will approve this new sound technology to be used so that we as in the United States, can build aircraft with a quiet sonic thump and then fly at supersonic speeds over land in the United States. So imagine flying from New York to California in less than 2 hours and enjoy your day and even fly back. So hopefully this will change the way we fly. You'll probably notice that right now there are lots of different companies who are working on supersonic aircraft. Right now, most of those other companies are working on supersonic aircraft that still produce a sonic boom. And so they're developing those. Yeah, Mark, please.
Yeah, so question, you probably read in the news in the last, I think it's 2-3 weeks, that United Airlines signed a contract with a company, I think called Boom.
Yep.
Does
Boom
NASA
Supersonic.
have anything to do with that company or any?
They talk with one another. However, Boom is predominantly making, while their aircraft looks somewhat similar to our X-59, it still produces a sonic boom. And so it's actually fairly different in that way. So it's more like the Concorde in some ways, that will still fly at supersonic speeds and make a sonic boom. It's exciting, but at this point with that aircraft, it will still only be allowed to fly over water. So when United's using those aircraft, which are great, and I think it's exciting to see supersonic flight back, it'll be for United flights that are flying overseas. So it won't be, so the two, it's a small world for sure. So Boom Supersonic and NASA definitely talk, but the technology is very different. So interestingly enough, I am based out of NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C., but thanks to the pandemic, I am here in Colorado with my family, and Boom Supersonic is here in Colorado. So it's a company I'm fairly familiar with, and they're doing lots of innovative things as well. But that's a great question, a really good question. So basically what we're doing is we're testing out technology and gathering data that would be sent to the FAA with the hopes of changing those regulations in time to come. What will happen as a result of that is if we do get to change those regulations, we will then be able to work with companies to help them change their technology to change that sonic footprint as well. So maybe a company like Boom Supersonic will then change their planes to include that technology that will allow the boom to change to more of a thump. So what we're going to do when we do this, and you'll see a picture in the upper right-hand corner of one of our wind tunnel test vehicles there, models of the X-59, is that we're going to be flying over select locations to gather citizen science data, which is incredibly exciting because we're going to be able to involve people from all over the country in the data that we're gathering. We have not selected the communities yet, so we don't know where we're going to fly. They're taking a look at a wide variety of places. And when I say flying over communities, it makes it sound like it's a very small flight. But in reality, these planes are flying, the X-59 will be flying at supersonic speeds. And so it's going to be covering hundreds of miles in each community. So when I say community, think huge. So as we start selecting these communities, we'll start selecting them in 2022. With flights that will begin in 2023, 2024. So it may seem like a long time away, but all the preparations that have to be done in the meantime are pretty significant. So we'll be flying over select locations to gather data. This data will then be compiled and sent along to the FAA with the hopes of allowing it. And while we do that, we're going to have lots of community engagement, lots of STEM activities going on, and lots of ways for the public to get involved. So as we do that, we'll be reaching out and working with libraries, with science centers, with museums, schools, to help get the word out and help get communities as involved as possible. So you will hear a lot more about this as we get going in the future, especially once we start narrowing down which communities we'll be in. And I can pretty much guarantee they're going to pick a wide variety of different locations to fly. So pretty exciting things to come up with. So stay tuned on that. Yes.
Can I volunteer that they fly over my community?
Exactly. Exactly. I'm really hopeful that there's a lot of different places, but I would think, and I am absolutely not the expert on locations, but if you think about it, it would only make sense to fly over coastal areas, over landlocked areas, over mountainous areas, plains, you name it. There's going to be a need for a lot of different areas. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for sure.
So I have a question here that's coming in from John and Laura Burnett. What would be the best way to keep current with this information?
That's a great question. And what I would say is there are a couple different ways. The first one is to join up on, so NASA Aeronautics has a Facebook page. We're active on, we also have a Twitter page. I help oversee we have a NASA Aeronautics for Educators page, so devoted not just to current events, but also STEM engagement opportunities. So if you're interested in education, so we definitely do a lot of social media. Also, if you go to nasa.gov, you can also find our aeronautics. We have an aeronautics web section devoted to that as well. I think those are some of the best ways to stay caught up with that in real time. We frequently publish web articles, web features about this on our social media feeds. We do link to our articles and different stories that follow along with these different types of events going on. So that would be probably the best way to stay engaged with us.
So if people were to go on social media, what exactly would they look for?
So you would look for NASA Aeronautics. So straightforward. So if you just go to Facebook or whatever, or Twitter, any of those, just go straight to NASA Aeronautics, and that will take you right there. Okay. Now, if you're interested in things in your local area, you can find those 4 NASA centers. Each of them have social media pages as well. So if you go to, so for example, NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center, they have their own that focuses primarily on the research and the activities they're doing. But our NASA Aeronautics page takes a lot of those posts and the different things that are happening at each center and shares them out on the NASA Aeronautics link to the wide audience.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure. So let's see, I will move ahead here and feel free to jump back with questions as we move along, but I will switch to our next aircraft, which is our X-57 Maxwell. So our X-57 Maxwell is our all-electric aircraft, and it's a small experimental aircraft powered completely by electricity. So for those of you who like some of the specs on this, we're using a 460 volt battery, so a fairly substantial. Well, it's actually a bank of batteries. It's not one. That makes it sound like one gigantic battery. I should probably reword
At least
that.
it's not one 9-volt battery, right?
Yeah, exactly. A little bit more. What's really great about this is we have 14 electric motors. They've all been specially designed and take up 42%, and the entire aircraft takes up 42% of the wing's original size. The electric motors, what you'll see if you take, it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but you will see that there are 2 larger pusher motors on the outside, and there are 12 smaller electric motors that are on the inside of the wings. And it's using distributed electric propulsion, which is basically load sharing between all of these different propellers. What's really exciting about the technology that we're developing with this is that these smaller propellers are actually producing more thrust than standard propellers that you see on a typical propeller-driven aircraft. What will happen is it's in flight. So as the Maxwell takes off, all 14 motors will be up and running. And then once we reach cruise altitude, the 12 smaller motors that you'll see right there will have propellers that collapse, and then they just retract so that they don't produce extra drag. Once we have enough lift, we don't need them any longer until we land. And so those 12 motors will just shut down, pull in within the wing, and then not be used until it's landing. We've modified a Tecnam P2006T aircraft. Some of you may be a little bit familiar. It's sort of Cessna sized, if that helps, put anything in perspective. And again, the wings you'll see are significantly smaller, 42% of their original size, also reducing weight and drag. And really its goal, there's many goals with this, but also reducing operating costs for small aircraft by 40%. If you know a lot about small aircraft, a lot of the costs associated with flying those aircraft have to do with operations. So whether that's fuel consumption and any number of mechanical updates that are needed. And so the goal is to really significantly reduce that, which will reduce barriers to flight as well as being great for the environment as well. So that's really one of the goals. The other goal is that we are testing out lots of new technology on this that we're sharing with industry partners. And so this is something that we're learning all along the way, everything from battery overloads to heat reduction of those batteries, heat reduction of motors. That has been a significant challenge that we've overcome in some innovative ways, which is really exciting. So you've probably all been really familiar with overheating batteries, and it's been in the news, everything from little hoverboards that kids drive around, ride around on, to larger aircraft that are using larger batteries. We've made some significant discoveries in technology, which is really exciting. Another benefit of us doing this is that as a federal agency, it's our job to share and work with industry around the country. So it's not for us, it's to share with everyone else. So we do a lot of the research and development, and industry gets to benefit from that and to work with us, which is really pretty exciting as well. So the X-57 Maxwell is set to make its very first flight, hopefully late October. So the goal is October 27th of this year. So we're getting very close to first flight. You'll see right there is a link. If you do just a plain old internet search, for the NASA X57, it will probably pull up the website that's listed there anyway, and you'll have a chance to really get a better understanding of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So lots of exciting things around both the X59 and the X57 as well.
April, did you say
Yes.
where they will be flying the X-57?
So the X-57 will fly out at NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center,
California.
and that's located near Palmdale, California, and that's located on Edwards Air Force Base.
Okay.
So we'll be utilizing the infamous dry lake bed. If you've watched The Right Stuff or anything like that, that's exactly where X-57 is going to fly. So at this point, there are no plans for it to fly elsewhere, although as projects evolve, things change, but at this point, that's where she lives. So we have a lot of different social media and outreach types of activities planned as we get closer to those dates. The dates had been tentative up until fairly recently. As you can imagine, COVID has wreaked havoc on everybody, everything. But as we get closer, we can start nailing down. It's hard to announce, we're going to fly, and then you can't say when or anything like that. But we're starting to get closer, and we're hoping to pull people in with lots of different opportunities to watch, on NASA TV, on, you name it, to watch her fly. So pretty exciting. And now we switch to basically drones in society, which we call here at NASA Advanced Air Mobility. So when you think of air taxis, drone cargo deliveries, and also smaller aircraft that honestly we don't even have yet, that all fits within our purview of advanced air mobility. And really what we're taking a look at is how do we get aviation and air mobility out past cities and out into communities and locations that may or may not be well serviced by aviation at this point. So when we take a look at that, that includes everything from, again, package deliveries that may be harder to reach in faraway areas, disaster relief. Also, it includes everything from forest fire management to scouting around for, hot spots for forest fires. They're studying algal bloom up in Lake Erie. And a lot of these different things are done with smaller, usually unmanned aircraft that can reach those areas safer and more efficiently. I do want to point out, as we talk about drones and unmanned aircraft, that there is technically no such thing as an unmanned aircraft because there are always people involved in the system. They just might not be on board the actual aircraft. So I like to point that out because sometimes you get these fears of all autonomous types of, robot-like things just doing their own thing. And it's never that way. There are always systems and people involved. They just might not be on the actual aircraft at that time.
So April, is there a specific NASA center where a lot of drone work is being done, or is this spread out among many of them?
So different centers focus on different areas of this, and the large part of the airspace, so the actual locations where we fly and figuring out the logistics of flying is done at Ames Research Center, and that's up in the more northern part of California. They do a lot of air traffic control types of things, so that includes advanced air mobility. So they do lots of that kind of testing. Flight testing of actual drones and technology often happens at Armstrong Flight Research Center. So again, where the X-57 Maxwell, they have lots of open space. Edwards Air Force Base and that dry lake bed provide tons of areas for safe testing of flights. Langley is also doing a lot, but they're doing a lot with the technology and the autonomous programming. So how do you program and code these different types of aircraft to integrate within our airspace system? So they do lots of that testing. And then Glenn Research Center does a lot of different work with engines themselves. So when you're looking at propellers and motors and noise and testing those types of technicalities out, that tends to happen at Glenn Research Center in Ohio. So like I said, these 4 centers integrate with each other a lot, and they all have specialty areas, but they're all needed in order to get something to fly. So it's kind of interesting to break it down into pieces like that.
And has NASA loaned a drone to you yet so that you can check it out?
I have smaller drones. I have more of what we call the hobby drones. And so I get to work with hobby drones. I work with STEM curriculum surrounding drones. So I work with a lot of that. So actually they did. The very first one they sent to me was a box of parts, literally. So it's here's a box of parts, build the small drone, and write a guide teaching people how to build it and integrate it into a system. So that was my first introduction 9 years ago into the world of drones. So I've learned a lot since then. But interestingly enough, when I go to a NASA center to conduct trainings and different types of things, I am not allowed to fly a drone in any way. So even though I'm able to, only NASA certified drone pilots who undergo a really rigorous amount of testing and flight control are allowed to fly drones on NASA centers. So, and most of our NASA centers are tied in closely with either an Air Force base or something like that. So to fly a drone out in Armstrong Flight Research Center, which is on Edwards Air Force Base, takes an act of Congress, I think, to be able to do that. So only a select few people actually get to technically fly. But what I do at home in Colorado, very different.
I hear you. I relatively recently got a drone, and what an amazing piece of equipment. We do quite a bit of travel, so I take it with me wherever we go. We were in Ecuador back in March, and I got some what I think is pretty awesome video footage of the Andes Mountains over these valleys that I just would not otherwise be able to get, but by flying the drone and hoping that it doesn't lose connection with my phone and go bye-bye and take off on its own. They're really neat.
They are. It's amazing, and it's opening up new ways to observe and conduct research and do things that we, like you said, we think we see everything with our 2 feet firmly planted on the ground, and you take off one of these little drones and suddenly you see things in a whole different way. So one of the things that I focus on, because I am primarily with STEM education, is I take a look at how do we teach, because you could go, Mark, and like you said, you went and you bought a drone, and there you go. And it's a hobby drone, and you don't need a license, and you don't need any special training. You can go zooming off doing, pretty much whatever you want. Is that we try to work with students and teach them what we call ethical airmanship. So while it might not be illegal, we really want students to start thinking about, should you fly the drone in this way? So there's the legality versus the ethics versus, just because you can take it to a park, does that mean you take it to a park and zoom it over and drive everybody's dogs nuts and freak them out? And the short answer is no. So we try to help people understand a little bit better the safety. The other component, like you said, is if you lose track of your drone and it gets out of your control, then you're suddenly putting other people potentially at risk who may or may not want anything to do with drones. So it's a responsibility as well. So, but what NASA takes a strong look at is how will drones of any size, so everything from small hobby drones to larger drones that are size of full-size aircraft, how will they integrate into our airspace? How will they do it safely? And there will always be a focus on peopled aircraft taking precedent over unmanned vehicles of any type. And so being designed within the system, and this is something Langley works on, this is something everybody works on, are at NASA, are systems in place to make sure that peopled aircraft are always first priority, and that Sense and avoid is a common term we use within NASA, and that is that these are designed from the beginning to sense others and to avoid others. So system safety being designed from the very beginning, which makes me happy for sure. So focusing a little bit on that, I do have education resources here within NASA Aeronautics. We have lots of different things. And so if you basically search for nasa.gov, and if you take a look at our Aero research, we have a resources page that has everything from what we're calling our next gen STEM activities. We have an Aeronautics at Home webpage that has lots of activities. Basically, we started this during the pandemic with the idea that everyone should have access to some fun aeronautics activities, and it's since grown, and this will not go away anytime soon because we really want everyone to have access to some fun and informational activities. We have leveled readers that are available for people to read more about the people within NASA and some of the projects we work on. They're made at different reading levels to allow different people to interact with it and still have the same content, which I'm excited about. The leveled readers section also has videos and accompanying materials to help people understand that material better. We even have activities for pre-K. So we have our Aeronautics for pre-K activity guide, lots of fun things. We have an entire program called Museum in a Box, which allows you to take these lessons and activities, whether you're a formal educator or whether you're doing outreach at a library or whether you're just want to get involved and jump in and learn more about forces of flight and all types of things like that. And then we also have ebooks. So if you want to dig deeper into our safety systems, or we have a book called Dressing for Altitude, which is about high altitude pressure suits. Anything you want to learn about, all of our ebooks are downloadable in multiple formats and available for everyone. What I love about working with NASA is that all of our materials are free. Our taxpayer dollars have paid for these things long ago. So it's one of the benefits of having a federal agency work on this, is that you never have to pay for what's available. We already have through, taxpayer dollars. We also have, for people who are interested, what we call our STEM modules. And these are all different activities focused on a specific topic. So for example, our X59, so we have a STEM module with videos, lessons. We laugh a little bit. NASA has the tendency of making educational activity guides that are very long. So huge downloadable books, basically. And what we've done with our STEM modules, sorry about that, I have two dogs, is that we've broken them down into bite-sized chunks. So there's a little bit of something for everyone, whatever you would like. So we have that available. And then the last two things I want to cover is that if you're interested at all in anything education within NASA, we have what we call our NASA Express email. So you can sign up for NASA Express, and once a week we will send you an email that compiles anything education related, whether that's a new activity, a contest, a challenge, anything like that. We feature these in our weekly email, so you can find out about those. And last but not least, we do have our NASA Aeronautics for Educators Facebook page that I moderate, and so you can sign up for that. And I also have a monthly STEM newsletter focused on NASA Aeronautics. So there was a question in the chat about how can you find out about community overflights and involvement. That will definitely be in these two locations as well. So if you're interested in that, you can if you go to the NASA Aeronautics for Educators Facebook page, you can also link to sign up for the newsletter if that's something you want to sign up for as well. So lots of opportunities to stay involved with us. And so I welcome any other questions you might have.
Yeah, so if anyone else has any questions, if you can type them into the YouTube chat box.
And Mark, you are muted, I see, just in case you were talking. I'm not sure if you were talking.
There I am. So I'm back. So yes, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. And all right. Can you see the chat box, April?
I cannot unless I stop.
Okay,
So
don't
I'm going
worry.
to stop sharing for now. That
Okay.
way
Let's
I
see.
can then, I think I'm looking. Actually, I cannot see the chat box. So,
Okay. It's not a question. One of the viewers. Okay. One of the viewers is having problems hearing.
oh no.
Hopefully that wasn't an ongoing issue, though.
Right.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat box, so
you write the vomit comment?
I've. So you don't work with the vomit comment, do you?
No, I do not. I have ridden in it once. I've flown in
yes?
it once. I almost got to name it the vomit comment for myself, but I did not. It was probably one of the most surreal experiences physically. So we as NASA will use the vomit comment to fly different types of experiments in a limited, microgravity situation. And so I did have the opportunity to do that at one point, and we had a slight mishap with doctor approval for the anti-nausea medication, so I was not able to fly, so it was one of those, a mishap with faxes going back and forth. So that tells you it was a little while ago. Well, no, doctor's offices still use faxes, but so I had Dramamine only, and that was almost not enough.
Oh boy! But I
The
bet
human
it
body does not like to do that. I just want to say.
must have been a good experience.
It was
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Like I said, your body just is, your body pretty much relies on gravity and feels pretty comfortable with gravity and, its normal effects. And when you don't feel that, your body's not sure what to do. So it's really interesting, and it was loads of fun for sure.
Good. Well, April, I'm not seeing any additional questions, so I want to thank you again so much for taking your time to join us.
Thank you. This has been really great. I love to share this. Reach out, jump onto the Facebook page if you need to reach me and you don't have my email address, which was there at the beginning. You can always find me. I am the NASA Educators for Facebook moderator. So if you have any questions or need to reach me, that's a slam dunk easy way to find me. So Thank you so much. This has been great. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, April. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. And for those who joined me tonight, I highly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you back. Don't forget, we've got a virtual JPL tour that you can sign up for. I will put detailed instructions in the description. And I hope to see you back also on Sunday, August 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern for a YouTube live event about NASA's new Moon and Mars rocket, the Space Launch System. So again, thanks so much. Have a great evening. Bye, April.